Jim Sponnick.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. The touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh no, 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 I'm a rocket man.
Patty, thank you. So thank you so much to Patty and to Eric, actually, for inviting me here today. We've had the opportunity to meet for coffee, I think, each of the last 3 summers. We typically make a journey to northern Minnesota in July of each year. And as Eric mentioned, Tower being the hotbed of education for Minnesota, and the fact that he just so happens to live there, we have been meeting there, and it's been really great to renew a relationship with Eric. He and I actually spent some time working together at Minnesota Power way back in the day. I did some summer interning there after Eric had started his very accomplished career there. But and of course, fantastic to get to know Patty. The Allworth Scholarship really had a very profound impact on me personally, and I'm proud and humbled to share a few stories with all of you today. Speaking of stories, it's been terrific to hear Gabby and Alex's stories, and certainly your messages of perseverance and resilience and following your passion really ring strong bells with me. So I'm going to share a few of those stories. Hopefully some of them resonate with you, and that perhaps you can apply. The title of the presentation this morning, being a launch person, is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Launching Your Dream. And Patty had a very large part in coming up with this as the final title for today. I have been very, very fortunate to have worked 184 space launch missions, and really enabling me to live my childhood dream. We're going to talk a little bit more about how that dream started with the Apollo 11 launch back 50 years ago. So with that, I do want to mention a subtitle. And Patty also deserves the credit for this. I first saw this quote from Denzel Washington that to me really tells it all. And the quote is, "Do what you got to do what you want to do." And again, I first saw it as a quote underneath Patty's email signature in one of those many emails that we've sent back and forth to one another. It's really a very succinct summary of what you really need to do to succeed in both life and in your career. I also especially want to thank all the math and science teachers and guidance counselors here today. Thank you so much for what you do, educating the youth and guiding them, and please continue what you're doing, and please do guide them to do what they got to do what they want to do in their lives. So, starting at 5 seconds before launch with Find Your Inspiration. This photo, by the way, so the video coverage of the Apollo 11 was pretty grainy, as I'm sure you have all seen. But this is a rather clear photo that Neil Armstrong took of Buzz Aldrin climbing down the ladder from the LEM onto the surface of the moon. And it really captures a lot of memories for me. Years later, I was able to meet Buzz a few times. I worked closely with his son, Andy, who worked with us at United Launch Alliance. And it was an honor to meet one of my heroes, and I was able to meet a few more along the way. But again, that Apollo 11 memory was really just huge for me. I grew up in Woodland with my parents and my 3 sisters, our 2-bedroom home in Woodland, and we'll never forget. Really, one of my most vivid memories at a young age was watching that Apollo 11 moon landing. It was a Sunday evening, July 20th, 1969.
That's 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds. Forward, drift. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
We're going to be busy for a minute.
Armstrong is on the moon.
Yeah,
Neil
step off the limb
Armstrong,
now.
38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here. Beautiful, beautiful. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Tranquility Base, Houston. Guidance recommendation is pings, and you're cleared for takeoff.
Roger, understand. We're number 1 on the runway. 7, 6, 5, engine arm ascent. Beautiful. Very smooth. Very quiet ride.
Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over.
Apollo 1, this is Apollo 11, reading you loud and clear. Our position 1330.
So I was hooked, to say the least. The Apollo 11 moon landing was so extraordinary, I think, mostly because it was such a momentous occasion, and it was a very positive event. Unfortunately, so many of our moments in history that we all remember are very tragic events. The Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or the assassinations of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr., and of course the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Apollo 11 was very different from that. It was an extremely positive event and was an amazing technical accomplishment, a really incredible example of what 400,000 people working across the country could band together and do in the decade of the 1960s. It was also fascinating to me that even though it was a United States funded project and developed project, that people all around the world believe that we did it. We, the people of the world, for all mankind, as Neil's so amazing words accurately accomplished when he stepped foot on the moon. So I was very fortunate, I know, to know from the time I was 9 years old what I wanted to work on, but it was just a huge, huge inspiration for me. Several years later, our Atlas team launched a mission called LRO and LCROSS. This was a mission that we launched in 2009, and there were two pretty cool parts of this mission. What you're seeing is the artist depiction of the Centaur upper stage from our rocket being impacted into the south pole of the moon. And what that impact and the spacecraft that was trailing behind it to capture the data from the impact, what it accomplished was confirming that there is in fact a substantial amount of water ice on the polar regions of the moon. So that's really going to be critical as we continue to explore our solar system and send people to Mars in the coming years. The other part of the mission was called Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the LRO portion. And it's a very high resolution mapping satellite that is continuing to operate around the surface of the moon. And 5 years ago, on the 45th anniversary of the moon, they created a short video that shows how the LRO mission did a high-resolution map of the Sea of Tranquility, where Buzz and Neil landed so many years earlier.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
So LRO, as I mentioned, is still operating around the surface of the moon. It's definitely going to be used to determine the landing sites for when men and women this time return to the surface of the moon in the next decade. It was also used recently. There was an Indian mission that had a failure upon attempting to land on the far side of the moon, and the LRO spacecraft was used to help map that site and to help give some clues as to why that mission did not succeed. So, without question, the thing I'm most proud of is my family. And sorry about that. Deb deserves all the credit for as wonderful as they are, but I wanted to talk about just a couple examples of inspirations. And again, I know I was really fortunate to know at a very young age what I wanted to do in life. Just a couple examples. Deb and I, we started dating in high school, and we both went to UND in Grand Forks. And first year of college, Deb was a business major, and that was not a great fit. She didn't love it. Was not the most fun year ever, and she really gave it some thought, and she changed her major to elementary and early childhood education. And with that change, she found what her passion was, and she absolutely thrived. She's a natural teacher, and she's parlayed those skills into being the best mom and grandma ever to our 4 grandkids. So Adam, we thought, at least I thought, was going to be the engineer of the family. He always did well in science and did off the charts well in mathematics. And I thought, wow, a natural, that's awesome. He's going to be an engineer. And he took some interest tests. And where I'm off the charts in having to know how things work and take them apart and put them back together and design them, Adam really did not have that interest. So it was good that he learned early that that was not going to be the right field for him. He did go on and get a double major in economics and communication, and he's really found his niche in, he's currently a finance manager for an ad and marketing firm and doing extremely well. Lisa, she was always great with kids as well, like her mom, and also a bit of an overachiever. And we thought she was going to be a pediatrician. And as she went to college, she fell in love with speech pathology. She got her bachelor's and master's degrees in speech pathology. She's amazing at that, and also both kids, amazing parents to their own kids. So Adam and Lisa are both with us here today. Adam's rightmost in the picture, and Lisa's second from the left. So we're now 4 seconds before launch. And the item here is do the work. And this is definitely including your education, getting your education and your first job, your first step in your career. Just a brief comment. This is a photo of a ship called the Mariner. It's a specially built ship for transporting our rocket stages from the factory. We have a 1.5 million square foot factory. It's about 37 acres under one roof, where we built our Atlas and Delta rockets in Decatur, Alabama. And we would transport them sometimes by aircraft, but more often by this ship that would take a 7-day journey from Alabama down through the Gulf of Mexico and to Cape Canaveral, or a 28-day journey through the Panama Canal for our missions launching from California. So that's what the photo is about in this one. But back to doing the work and pursuing your education. When I was a senior in high school, a thrilling day was when I was notified of receiving the All-World Scholarship. Mom and Dad could not afford to pay my way to college, and this was a huge relief to have the benefit of the All-World Scholarship to I think it was Alex that mentioned allow some sleepless nights about other things, but not so much about being able to pay for college. So thank you. Deb and I had a great 4 years, notwithstanding the first year as a business major for Deb, but a great 4 years at the University of North Dakota. Really enjoyed our education there. It was a great time for hockey in Grand Forks. We had 3 appearances in the NCAA Final Four, won 2 of those, and few of the members of our team participated in the gold medal 1980 U.S. Olympic team, and so that was a thrill. And by the way, thrilling to see what the Bulldogs have done in recent years. Their hockey skills are amazing. Anyway, so Deb and I both graduated from UND, got married, and we moved to San Diego, all in a few weeks at a time. I had received an offer and accepted that offer to work with the Space Systems Division of General Dynamics in San Diego, California. Had a couple other job possibilities, but none of them were working on rockets, so it was pretty clear where we were going to go. And it was working on the space shuttle program. We were adapting our Centaur upper stage to fly some very large spacecraft and satellites out of the space shuttle cargo bay. I was in particular working on the guidance system. We had to pretty significantly change some things about the guidance system because of flying out of the space shuttle. The guidance system was maybe going to have to operate for several days consecutively rather than a more typical 1 or 2 hour mission. So we had to develop some things. We at first were going to integrate a device called a star scanner to take out some of the errors that would build up over those several days of operating. And later on, our team developed an integrated process where we really connected the Centaur's guidance system with the 3 guidance systems on board the space shuttle, and had great fun in developing the process for doing that. We had some operations to go through that I had to work jointly with the astronauts and demonstrate the maneuvers that they would need to go through to make all of this work. So the picture was something my mom was very proud of. The little first grade writing assignment on the left side was to describe what kind of a truck you would drive if you were to drive a truck. And I picked a telephone truck because I really wanted to work with something with electricity. And so she put that side by side with my graduation photo from UND, receiving my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. So mom loved that one, and we still have it to this day. So we're now 3 seconds before launch, and the item at 3 seconds is experience setbacks and adjust. All about that resilience that was mentioned earlier. As I mentioned, I was working on the space shuttle program at the time, and it was January of 1986. And I'd been working for close to 4 years on the program. Some people had been working about 5 or 6. And the program I'm referring to again is Shuttle Centaur. We were nearing our first launch. We were supposed to launch that first Centaur out of the space shuttle in May of 1986. So we were heavy into our training for the launch. We had 2 different teams that were alternating weeks going down to Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center and going through trainings and simulations for our upcoming May launch. When that happened, the last launch that was ahead of ours was the Space Shuttle Challenger Mission 51L, launching late in January of 1986.
Bart and Hallie experiment, and here comes the flight crew now. Commander Dick Stobie, followed by Mission Specialist Judy Russell, Ron McNair, pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McCullough, Feature in Space, Ellison Onizuka, and payload specialist Greg Jarvis. Big smiles today. Confidently getting into the van. They're going to go up to that pad and attempt a second try at launch today. It'll take a few minutes for the astronaut van to get to the pad.
10,
9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs.
Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Roger, go to throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink. We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Needless to say, a very tragic day for our nation, for those in the space community, and especially for the families of the 7 crew members. We were gathered around a speakerphone. Our other team that was doing their training at the Cape that week was on the phone with us, describing what they were seeing, which of course at first was beautiful and then was not. So 6 weeks after the Challenger tragedy, the program that I was on was canceled. I'll never forget our program manager, good friend named Marty Winkler, gathered us all together in the cafeteria because it was the only place large enough to get the whole team together, and told us that the program was over and we were going to have to figure out how to move on. So a lot of things happened. There were major layoffs within my company. This Shuttle Centaur program was by far the biggest program within the division that I worked of General Dynamics. So we had major layoffs and lots of people leaving on their own as well because they weren't sure what the future was for work in the space business there. One of the things, our nation very significantly changed some policy items with regard to operating the space shuttle. Up until Challenger, the nation was heading towards launching everything on the space shuttle. And a big part of that was to amortize the very expensive cost of operating that program over lots of things, including satellite launches. Well, we realized you don't need to put human lives at risk to launch satellites. We had been doing that before Challenger, and the nation could do that again. So some major changes there. One of the things that I considered at the time was potentially pursuing one version of my dream, which was maybe someday to become an astronaut. And it's a long shot to become an astronaut, but I thought perhaps with the experience I gained, there might have been a shot. But a couple of things. One, this was a year or so after Challenger, and two, our son had just been born, so we were raising a family. And Deb and I talked, and we agreed that that probably wasn't the right path for our family to take, so we did not pursue that. But with those policy changes that were mentioned, there were some major changes and shifts in how the nation pursued space business. Both the Atlas and the Delta rocket programs were being phased out at that time, And because of those policy changes, both of them were resurrected rather by their respective companies. In our case, with General Dynamics, we commercialized and started operating the Atlas program. And then McDonnell Douglas, later Boeing, did the same with the Delta program. And a couple of decades later, I had the good fortune to be the leader of both of the Atlas and Delta programs. But anyway, more immediately in the decade that followed, or the several years that followed the Challenger tragedy, with that resurrection of the Atlas program, I had a really great opportunity that came my way to develop a next generation guidance system for our Atlas rockets. And that was a very difficult but a very rewarding next 4 years, developing that system to fly on the new Atlas II rocket. So now to two seconds before launch, more work. I would call this kind of the mid-career phase. After that avionics guidance system development that I mentioned, I had the opportunity to work on developing and managing various other projects related to the operation of the Atlas program. And we were at this time living in San Diego. That's where the program was headquartered, and that's where Deb and I and now our kids, Adam and Lisa, had lived. In the mid-90s, General Dynamics was selling off substantial portions of their business. And no sooner had they declared that the space systems business was a core business, which meant it was basically untouchable and wasn't going to be sold, that very shortly after that, the business was sold. Lockheed Martin purchased the space business from General Dynamics, and it turned out to be a wonderful thing. They had some terrific space programs, and their space business was headquartered in Denver, Colorado. So in the mid-90s, we picked up the family and moved to Denver, and we also moved the Atlas program from San Diego to Denver, including moving all of the production there as well. It was a difficult move because it was happening at a busy time for launches, but a phenomenal move. Our family just absolutely loves Denver. Reminds us a lot of Minnesota. So in 2003, after working those various engineering responsibilities and things through the decade of the 90s, I was selected to lead the Atlas launch vehicle program, and it was really a fascinating time because we were flying out the last of what we called the heritage versions of the Atlas that had some very strong design similarities to those rockets that were developed in the late 1950s and that launched John Glenn and the other Mercury astronauts in the early 1960s. And we were also starting to fly our first Atlas III and Atlas V next generation rockets. So I was fortunate to lead the program during that time of transition. And here's a little clip from a documentary that we produced called On the Shoulders of Giants that reflected upon those that had gone before us and really gotten the program to that point. And here's that clip.
On the Shoulders of Giants. The last of the Atlas IIAS rockets, with its classified payload, stands by for a critical national security mission for the National Reconnaissance Office. Atlas Centaur 167, the last of the Atlas stage-and-a-half boosters. Its 47-year production run rivals the longest records in aviation history. Named after the mighty giant of Greek mythology who carried the world on his shoulders, Atlas pushed the envelope with innovations that shaped and influenced the development of other systems that followed. It evolved into a workhorse and a pathfinder. Perhaps most important, Atlas opened doors to space, doors that will continue to be opened wider and wider well into the 21st century.
Late 1950s, during Atlas ICBM development, we tested, failed, and kept flying through more failures to learn more. The goal was to get a operable ICBM, and we had to do it quickly because we were very worried that the Russians were ahead of us.
3, 2, 1, стреляй!
The beeps of Sputnik 1 in October 1957 were an alarming wake-up call. the Soviets were first to get a satellite into space. America had fallen behind in the race to create the ICBM.
That sucker went over and we tracked it, we heard it, picked it up on the radio and listened to it and all cried. Because they had beaten us.
167 is rolled out of Lockheed Martin's Denver facility. For months, the production crew has meticulously assembled the last Atlas IIAS rocket for this final journey.
The early Atlas pioneers dreamed of using Atlas to put men into space, to explore the moon and the planets, and to improve our understanding of our own planet. Now, a new generation of workers on the Atlas program, along with a new generation of Atlas designs, will be carrying this dream into the future.
By the early 60s, the Atlas had made the transition from ballistic missile to space launch vehicle. On February 20th, 1962, an Atlas rocket carried the most precious cargo in its short history. John Glenn rode atop Project Mercury's Friendship 7 to become the first American man to orbit the Earth.
When an astronaut walks in and says, you know, I'm going to ride on top of that thing, you suddenly check, double check, triple check everything that you can as you move along.
A rocket with 3.5 million horsepower was needed to ensure the fate of the 168-pound John Glenn.
He said, "What's the problem, Tom?" And I said, "Well, I want to be sure that you know that if something's going to happen, you want to know what I'm going to do, and I want to get your concurrence with it, see?" And he says, "I got complete confidence in you. Just go ahead and do the job." And that's it. That's the end of this meeting.
It was a daunting job with absolutely no room for failure.
Good Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn.
I think it's so cool that John Glenn and the Mercury astronauts were launched on an Atlas back in the early 60s. One other mission I want to kind of highlight in the discussion here is the Pluto New Horizons mission. This is a mission that we launched almost 14 years ago, and it was really my most memorable mission out of the many that I had the opportunity to work. Again, it was launched 5,025 days ago. That's kind of hard to believe because in some ways it seems like yesterday, but. In January of January of 2006, the planets were aligned to enable this mission to Pluto. Now, the scientists and the engineers that had been working this mission for about 10 to 15 years before the launch to conceptualize the mission, decide what it was going to do, and decide when it could launch. Well, our trajectory folks were involved with that launch, and this January of 2006 opportunity was a unique one that Jupiter was aligned and right where it needed to be for the spacecraft to do what's called a gravity assist or a slingshot maneuver to pick up speed by flying close to Jupiter on the way to Pluto. Pluto is some 3 billion miles away. To put that into perspective, the Earth is 92 million miles away from the Sun, so many, many, many times how far the Earth is from the Sun. So even with all of that, we had an extremely powerful rocket, and as you'll hear, the fastest spacecraft ever launched. It took 9.5 years to reach Pluto. Here's a little bit from a clip that described some of the highlights of the mission before it launched.
Signal from Mariner 10 at Mercury.
Receiving signal from Mariner 2 at Venus.
We have contact with Mariner 4 at Mars.
Receiving signal from Pioneer 10 at Jupiter. We have contact with Pioneer 11 at Saturn.
Receiving signal from Voyager 2 at Uranus.
We have contact with Voyager 2 at Neptune.
We have a very small spacecraft on top of a very big rocket.
We're the hood ornament on the Atlas V.
We're going to be the fastest spacecraft ever launched. So what we're looking for is speed.
Pluto is a long, long, long way away.
The combination of a 1,000-pound spacecraft and the power of the Atlas V are going to combine to be ferocious.
Discovery and the quest for knowledge drive the human spirit to explore our solar system. That desire is just as strong today as it was over 43 years ago when America's first interplanetary probe encountered Venus. Since that first planetary mission in the 1960s, America has sent spacecraft to every planet except Pluto. Pluto's time has come. A voyage of more than 3 billion miles begins with a spectacular launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida. New Horizons will ride into space aboard an Atlas V 551, the most powerful Atlas to date. With an initial thrust of 2.5 million pounds at liftoff, AV-10 will send the 1,000-pound New Horizons probe on the fastest trip ever outside the solar system by a spacecraft, passing the moon in less than 9 hours.
The combination of a light spacecraft and a very powerful launch vehicle was required in order to be able to propel this mission to Pluto in a reasonable period of time. With this launch, we will be demonstrating kind of the peak performance capability and the maximum performance that the Atlas system can provide to our customers.
Boosting the New Horizons spacecraft to the proper trajectory required several modifications to the current Atlas V configuration. This mission will test the technical expertise of the Atlas team as they implement upgraded avionics and solid rocket boosters.
This launch vehicle for this mission incorporates 5 strap-on solid rocket boosters combined with the RD-180 engine system. That incredibly powerful vehicle configuration is going to demonstrate itself by a very rapid acceleration at liftoff. We've developed this upgraded version of the SRB together with our partners, NASA and also the Air Force, and of course. So one of the reasons that this Pluto New Horizons mission was so memorable was because it was very difficult to get there. Of course, it was an amazing mission, first ever visit to Pluto and all that, but there were many aspects. A typical mission would take us 2 years to integrate onto the rocket and design how we were going to fly it and operate it and separate it as the rocket launched. This one was about double that. Our team worked for about 4 years on integrating the Pluto mission onto, as was mentioned, the largest version of our Atlas V rocket. Prior to this, the Atlas V had only flown with 3 strap-on solid rocket boosters. This one was going to fly with 5 of those. And also, we integrated a third stage to the forward end of the rocket, again, to get that speed that was mentioned in the little video clip. We were having to propel the rocket to over 36,000 miles per hour at separation. So we integrated that third stage that was developed by our teammates at the Boeing company. It was a major process to certify all of the safety processes for the nuclear power plant that actually powered the spacecraft. If you think about Pluto being 3 billion miles away from the sun is very, very dim, so solar arrays could not be used for a mission to Pluto. So the folks working the Pluto mission like to share the story that it was plutonium that was powering the Pluto spacecraft. And so it was very cool, but it's a very hazardous operation, and certainly if there was a major explosion at launch, it could be very hazardous. So there were a lot of processes put in place to make sure all of that was done just right. As was mentioned, we had new versions of the solid rocket boosters and all new avionics, the electronics on board the rocket. So things were going along pretty well. We were a few months away from launch. We had already stacked the rocket onto the launch pad a little bit earlier than we normally would because we had this very tight, what we call a planetary launch window that we needed to make in January. So 14 years ago today, October 24th, a day I'll never forget, Hurricane Wilma hit. And I remember it for a couple of reasons. Deb and I have a place in Florida that we had bought earlier in 2005. And we were there, and this was the first time we had to put up the hurricane shutters because Hurricane Wilma was coming on the coast of Florida from the Gulf side. And so that happened. The house was fine. But that hurricane meandered across the state of Florida and went over and through our launch pad and did a substantial amount of damage to this building that's shown in the photo the left-hand photo is what we saw the day after the hurricane. That building is 30 stories tall. It's called our vertical integration facility, where we stack the rocket and check it out before launch. So some 300 feet tall. And that opening that you see is about 75 feet tall, and it was a portion of what's called our megadoor. It was an aluminum frame and a Teflon-lined fabric that the hurricane took out a, again, 75-foot tall section. Most of that door came crashing down outside the rocket on top of the vans that are shown way down in the bottom of that photo. But a few of the pieces came down inside, and one aluminum piece in particular grazed the side of one of the solid rocket boosters. So we had to very quickly recover. This did about $9 million of damage, and also put us at risk of making that January launch window. So the photo on the right shows that one of the things our team did was very quickly fabricated those 3 very large metal doors as a means of protecting the rocket for the next couple of months leading up to the launch. So anyway, Hurricane Wilma 14 years ago today was a pretty vivid memory to me. And anyway, so we did get through that very successfully. Oh, also, we had a major qualification test failure. We had a booster propellant tank that failed in a major test program we were conducting in Denver. And we were able to demonstrate to our own satisfaction that failure had no implications for this launch, but the NASA team wasn't so sure. And there was actually a great deal of interest. We had a team of NASA experts that flew the NASA aircraft out to Denver over the Christmas holidays. They wanted to see firsthand the tank that had failed and satisfy themselves. And even after all that, there was still a portion of NASA that voted that we should not be launching this mission in January. So it was the NASA administrator, Michael Griffin, who made the final call that NASA was okay, in fact, with proceeding with the launch. They agreed ultimately with our assessment. So anyway, difficult getting there, but phenomenally successful once it happened.
The whole objective is to build for speed, given the distance this thing's trying to travel.
Status check.
Go Atlas.
Go Centaur.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff of NASA's New Horizons spacecraft on a jet to visit the planet Pluto and then beyond.
Mission like this really is special. It presents some unique challenges, and it really excites all of us.
I look at it like taking candy from a baby. It's going to be raining data, and all of it's new.
It never gets old. The Apollo missions took 3 days to get to the moon. And this spacecraft we launched in the afternoon, and before the evening news, about eight hours later, the spacecraft passed by the orbit of the moon. So 3 days versus about 8 hours kind of gives you a perspective on what that 36,000 mile per hour speed was all about. So these are 2 of the images that were taken by the New Horizons spacecraft. The image on the left is of Pluto. It's some 1,500 miles across, and that was taken on July 14th, 2015, just a few years ago. And on New Year's Day of this year, the same spacecraft flew by an object called Ultima Thule. that was 1 billion miles further than Pluto. That's how much further it's traveled in the few years since 2015. So some very, very cool and important scientific findings from both of these missions. We're actually having a launch reunion event tomorrow evening in Florida. Just kind of the various things aligned for this to happen. Alan Stern, whom you saw several times in that video clip, is the principal investigator for the mission. I was emailing congratulations to Alan after the New Year's Day flyby, and he said, "Hey, my team's going to be in Orlando for a conference in October, and we should get together." So we've planned this event, and that's where we'll be tomorrow evening. A lot of the folks that you saw in that video will be there. We've got about 42 people coming for that, so we're going to have a good time. Alan's going to tell us much more about what New Horizons has been doing the last 14 years. So we're now 1 second before launch, finally. And the item here is continuously improve. And I am an absolute firm believer in the need for and importance of continuous improvement, both in your personal lives and certainly in your professional lives. It's interesting. This logo is called Perfect Product Delivery, and I'll describe what it's all about. But the motivation for it was several things that were going on at the time, and the time was 2006, the year following the launch we just showed you. And although our missions were still happening very successfully, there were a lot of things about the program and the business that were not so perfect. The New Horizons mission in particular, we had 300 engineering design changes released after the rocket was shipped to the launch site. That's not a good thing when you have to be modifying the rocket out in the field where it's not really intended to be built, but it's intended to be operated. We also had some 50 different what are called qualification tests occurring, major components on the vehicle that had to be test demonstrated that they were going to operate properly and survive the mission. And the issue with those still occurring while the rocket was at the launch site was that any of those that failed meant that we were likely again to have to change out hardware before we could satisfy ourselves that we could launch safely. And also we very substantially overran the cost for integrating the spacecraft. And so the mission in the end wasn't a business success either. It cost more to launch than we were paid to launch it. So anyway, we really realized this as kind of a watershed moment that we realized we needed to do some things differently on the program. And several of the members of the team got together and we developed this perfect product delivery. The perfect product part is all about the mission success. And in fact, the team had been doing extremely well at that. But the perfect delivery part was, as I just summarized, not going so well. So we really concluded we needed to change some fundamental things about how we operate on the program. And we started to make it part of everybody's job to act on that continuous improvement mindset. Every day they should be spending a portion of their day improving what they're doing in their own jobs and, most importantly, satisfying the needs of their downstream customers. We had a couple thousand people working on the program, and know it or not, just about everybody on the program has customers. So it was really about evolving this into what we called an ethic on the program. Not just the mission success, but the program success as well. So team did a phenomenal job in developing this and making it happen over the years. We're talking these examples in a countdown format, and really the continuous improvement though would apply every single step of the way. So finally, we're at Launch Your Dream. We're at the launch. My message here is don't forget to enjoy the moment. You have many opportunities in your life and in your career where you're doing important things, you're making a difference in somebody's life, and enjoy those moments, relish them. There will be many, and don't ever forget to stop and smell the roses. So just two examples quickly. This photo on the left is a launch that we did in the end of 2014. That's our Delta IV Heavy rocket. a very, very large, very capable rocket, and we were launching the Orion spacecraft on a flight test mission. Orion is what's going to be used to return humans to the moon. This was a test to go demonstrate its capabilities and to land it in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Mexico. This mission got a lot of press in the Denver area because our company, United Launch Alliance, was doing the rocket, and Lockheed Martin was building the Orion capsule for it. So basically, all parts of the mission had a very, very strong Denver connection. So it got a lot of press in the area. It was fun. Deb was actually with me for that launch, along with several other friends. And when we got back, that sign was filling our garage door. And what was cool to me was not so much the congratulations, Jim, but it was that the mission so excited our neighbors and our neighbors' children that they felt motivated to go say something about it. The favorite signature, which you can't read on there, is Jacob, the little boy in the end of our cul-de-sac. It says, "Jacob, future rocket scientist." So thought it was awesome. So very, very cool. There was an interview with John Hamm, the actor, during last summer's Stanley Cup, because he's a big St. Louis fan. And he was asked what he hoped the St. Louis Blues potentially winning the Cup was going to achieve, or was going to mean for him. And he said, "I don't know what it'll mean for me, but I hope it's as memorable as when I, John Hamm, saw the St. Louis Cardinals win the World Series when he was a little boy." He said, "It needs to go motivate those 30 or 40,000 little kids." And anyway, I feel the same way about the rocket business. So final example here. In 2011, we launched the MSL mission. It was the Curiosity rover that's currently operating on the surface of Mars. Another fascinating launch, another one with a nuclear power plant on board, so we had all those special safety considerations. Another planetary launch window that had to launch when it needed to. And by far the most capable rover to ever operate on another planet. So the coolest thing about working missions like this is getting to meet the needs of the customers that have been designing their missions, their babies, around the mission, and to see that happen, and then to follow later what's happened with their missions. I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but there's a group of people walking out ahead of the rocket. By the way, we rolled the rocket to the launch pad one day before launch. And so one of my very favorite things to do for each of our missions was to go take the 10 or so customers from the mission and rock ahead of the rocket. And it was always very emotional for the customers that we were launching. They get to see their baby is up in the nose cone on the forward end, and it's going to leave the planet the next day. So just always an amazing thing. And like I said, the coolest part is then not only the hour or two or three of launch, but following their missions afterwards. For this mission, I was able to be at the control center where they were landing the Curiosity rover onto the surface of Mars, and that's in Pasadena, California, the Jet Propulsion Lab. And this mission, if you remember it, has a very complicated landing process. It's called 7 Minutes of Terror. And there's a sky crane lowering the rover onto the surface of Mars. Anyway, I was able to be there where they were doing that. And here's a little video showing the MSL Curiosity landing.
Things are looking good. Coming up on entry. Vehicle reports entry interface. At this time, it'll begin pressurizing the propulsion system to increase the thrust of the system. It'll use that for all the maneuvering in the atmosphere we're about to do. We are standing by for guided start of guided entry. We are beginning to feel the atmosphere as we go in here. The vehicle has just reported via tones that it has started guided entry. At this time, the vehicle is beginning to steer its way to the target. We have seen peak deceleration. It is starting its first bank reversal. It is reporting that we are seeing G's on the order of 11 to 12 Earth G's. Bank reversal 2 is starting. We are now getting telemetry from Odyssey. We should have parachute deploy around Mach 1.7. Parachute is deployed. We are decelerating. Heat shield has separated. We're found the ground. We're down to 90 meters per second at an altitude of 6.5 kilometers and descending. Standing by for backshell separation. We are in powered flight. We're at an altitude of 1 kilometer descending. Standing by for sky crane. Sky crane is started.
Signal to us, you remain strong.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars. Time to see where our curiosity will take us.
Got thumbnails.
That's what it's all about. So, thank you very much. This last slide is photographs that my son Adam took. Adam helped tremendously with these slides, by the way. But my whole family came down for my last launch with United Launch Alliance in the end of 2015. And Adam took this view from the seat that I had been in for many launches in our Mission Director Center, overlooking the Launch Control Center. So that's where we did the final part of these many of these launches. But thank you very much. Thanks to the Allworth Scholarship, and don't forget to do what you got to do what you want to do.
It's gonna be a long, long time. Touchdown brings me round again to find